right. Perfect. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us here this evening for another virtual lecture from the National Barn Alliance. This one is being led by Professor Michael Spencer of UMW's Department for Historic Preservation. Currently serves as the chair of the department there, but he's been around for since 2009, right, when we moved here to Fredericksburg, because as I mentioned before, he is my husband, and so I know him fairly well. And he was also so kind back in 2013 to really help out for those who have been around for a while with the National Barn Alliance's winter meeting. We actually held that meeting at the University of Mary Washington, and so several students, along with Professor Spencer, participated in that effort and shared some things related to barn documentation. So I think tonight is in a way a sort of follow-up, because at that time we were talking about how documenting barns is a great way to record lots of details that, of course, we know sometimes in a general survey are missed about the physical structure and the construction of the building, but also it's rather non-threatening. You know, we would love to think that all agricultural structures and beautiful barns can be preserved and saved, but realistically, we know that a lot of farmers and people with historic farm properties don't have the finances to keep them around. So anyhow, so Michael, I guess you started teaching an agricultural preservation class as kind of an elective there for a while, and I believe that 2013 meeting, which did result in a joint National Barn Alliance and UMW publication. Again, I apologize for my dementia-ridden dog. The drugs will kick in soon. Oh, thank you. That same publication is still available on our website, actually, that you can download as a PDF for free if you wanted to check it out. But like I said, I think at that time you were discussing some easier ways because as compared to traditional methods of measured drawings and things, to capture a lot of information about historic barns and agricultural outbuildings. So I think, like I said, this is kind of a good follow-up and kind of keeps us abreast. And for the lay people like me can introduce some concepts and new ideas on how barn documentation can be used in different ways to continue the broader work of preserving our agricultural history. Okay. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Professor Michael Spencer get started. Thank you for your time. I'm on mute. Oh, I will say, please do hold questions until the end of the presentation, or type them in the chat if you need a reminder. Hi, Daddy. Good luck.
Hey, Danae, can I just quickly chime in on the question thing? It does not bother me. Maybe you're doing it for recording purposes, but I'm happy to answer questions as we go. If people want me to elaborate on a certain subject, or if it's a little bit too detailed and need me to explain further. I think it's important to understand the concepts as we walk through them. And again, thank you, Danae, for that great introduction. Should have you talk on the subject. I already know so much about it. Again, learned a lot over the years on it. But again, I want to thank the Barn Alliance for having me on this evening. Again, I'm interested in the subject, and I give a couple caveats before I talk into group. And some of those include, I'm always learning about this stuff. And so this is kind of what I've learned over the course of a decade or so about documentation. But also, and just a reminder, folks want to mute. That would be great. Thank you. Not that I can speak very loudly if need be. Kind of just going back to introductions here. Always been interested in digital documentation. It's come a long way recently. And we're going to kind of explore some of those concepts this evening about the documentation methods, but also look at what I'm really fascinated by recently, how we disseminate the data. How do we get it out there? And I'm going to introduce a couple platforms and some software that's free, it's easily accessible, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to really figure out how to use. You can go to the nth degree with this stuff if you want to, but the idea here is to at least generate some ideas about how we can get beyond measured drawings and actually use modeling, use the documentation that we do in kind of proactive ways to get people excited about barns, get people excited about agricultural structures, but also kind of engage that public. So I'll go ahead and start with my screen share here. And I'm going to share my screen. There we go, screen 2, because I'll probably pull up some windows in the future here that we can kind of take a look at. Also, I've got double screens, so I should be able to see if folks have questions, but if others want to monitor that for me, or if you just want to pipe up, that's fine as well. And so from the beginning here, digital documentation and dissemination. You got a point cloud, so what? So what I want to talk about again are the documentation methods that we've been using recently that generate these great sets of data. They're wonderful. But at the end of the day, I was always frustrated when I was working with this stuff about what do you do after you generate it? Yeah, you get a measure drawing. That's fantastic for an architect, fantastic for an engineer, and academics like myself love it. But again, for the community and the people we're trying to reach, a fly through only goes so far. So how can you start using this stuff to really benefit barn preservation, but any kind of aspects of cultural heritage? And so one of these techniques is using interactive type platforms where we can look at lectures, but we can also engage the models that we create in real time. This is a program called Roomy that I'll talk about later on in the lecture that allows people to come in on their desktop as avatars to explore the models, but also to look at lecture settings. And so you have the ability to independently interact with these models, take a look at stuff, but also interact with the people who are presenting the information. So really some cool new tools that are out there that can help make aware the stuff that we're doing in barn preservation, agricultural preservation, or really cultural heritage. But that's skipping ahead a little bit. I want to start back to where things kind of began, and that's with basic documentation, kind of run through some of those methods that are out there. Of course, hand documentation, what most of us are familiar with, and that's the pulling of the tape that's going out in the field, that's taking the photographs. Now, the different techniques I'm going to present aren't necessarily taking that interaction with the site away. I hope they're going to add to it. But this just kind of presents where things are kind of going. So here we've got a group of students about 6 or 7 years ago. This is actually at the Houseworth Barn in Orange County, Virginia. So owned by the Montpelier Foundation, which is of course in the news for other things recently. But for the longest time, we were working with them on their barn documentation. We had an entire class dedicated to this. In some cases, 15 students working on 3 or 4 barns during an entire semester. So we got the measure drawings done, but you understand that's a lot of man hours that go into the actual measure drawing production itself. Some great measure drawings there, but for all we know, these stay in shelves. They're not utilized until someone needs to do, say, a rehabilitation or work with the structure. And even then, a lot of times you're not going to be looking at measure drawings. So we always ran into this conundrum that we're spending a lot of time doing this stuff, a lot of energy with the documentation. But where does it go beyond just those measured drawings? Is there a way that we can use this to help benefit or communicate with the lay people out there who might be interested in barn preservation, but just don't know it yet? And so there are some new techniques out there that make the process of documentation more efficient. And I should kind of couch that a little bit by saying new to preservation as in the last decade or a little bit longer. Some of you have probably been aware of these techniques for a long time. In terms of industry that's out there, private industry, they've been around for a long time, and even government agencies have used things like photogrammetry for quite a long bit of time. So preservation kind of slowed to adopt it, but it's added some efficiencies to our documentation processes. And one of the earliest ways to do this is through a process known as photorectification. And essentially there, what you're doing is you're gathering selective data. In this case, we've got Emily Anderson here with a new friend, but she's documenting Clover Hill Barn in Albemarle County, Virginia. And she's using a total station, which is essentially a laser measuring device to selectively capture data points. So 1 point at a time. And the idea there is that she's going to use those points to help remove perspective as well as lens distortion that a camera is going to give you when you take an image. So the idea is that at the end of it all, you have a flat image that's accurate from which you can trace and get your measurements or obtain your measurements. Originally, the software that I used, and there are a number of different softwares that are out there, but I used a Qubit software program that was called TachyCAD in conjunction with PhotoPlan. Now, recently that's been bought by Faro, and you're going to see Faro, the name, a couple times in this presentation. They're kind of leading the charge in a lot of laser scanning and kind of photogrammetry type software. So Faro bought up Qubit and is currently offering the package as built software. And I'll talk towards the end of this about cost, because cost does play a significant role in what type of measuring process you're going to use. But here we have Emily Anderson using this total station, gathering her points. And just for illustrative purposes, this is essentially what it's going to do on that elevation. So each one of these dots represents a point that she's captured. And so this is actually put in the SketchUp just to give you a fly through animation, but you can see that all these data points have XYZ coordinates. And what she's going to do then is she's going to apply those over a photograph and then stretch out that perspective distortion, use the calibrated camera, and that will have the calibration necessary to remove the lens distortion. So a fairly accurate image, or very accurate image, I should say, from which to draw over. And so here we see just an illustration there of our data points connecting to the same images or same points on the image, and then kind of pushing and pulling that to eventually get these wonderful line drawings that Emily produced of the Clover Hill barn. So down to the nails. And we're talking less than 1/4 inch accuracy if you're particular about where you're gathering your data points. Now, I like this technique for a lot of reasons. One, I don't have to foot the bill. The university does as a teaching tool. So that's great. But the other thing is it's selective data capture allows me to put in a little extra time up front, but on the kind of processing end, I'm not dealing with 5 million data points, which when you look at a laser scan or you look at some photogrammetric models, your data points can be extensive. And I see in there, we've got a kind of a chat. Let's see, move that over here. Yeah, if you have a question, pipe up.
That was me. I thought I'd heard someone try to say something, but I didn't know if it was a question for you or if there was some other blurb. So I just threw a quick comment out to everyone in case. Was there a question?
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me at any time. You can even raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'm good at that with the students, lots of practice. The accuracy here with these line drawings that the kind of photogrammetry or photorectification, I should say, offers is really great. And as I was saying, I like it because it allows the kind of post-processing effort to be a little bit easier compared to the laser scans and the photogrammetry, which are generating millions of data points. So they're kind of pluses and minuses to all of it. Another technique that a lot of you have heard about is laser scanning. And again, Faro plays a significant role in this, as does Autodesk, which makes a lot of the software that we can use to interpret. So Faro has their own software that will be used in conjunction with their laser scanners, although I think a lot of folks like to use Recap Pro, which is an Autodesk software. Issues with that: laser scanners, they're not as expensive as they were, but they're still pretty expensive. Recap Pro isn't all that cheap, although you can do monthly subscriptions. But then that's not necessarily the means to the end. You also have to look at other software like AutoCAD to generate the line drawings. So there are a lot of complexities in terms of using laser scanning. And as I think some folks I've worked with recently can comment or attest to, sometimes even opening up a laser scan file, an LAZ or an LAS, is difficult if you don't have the right equipment to do that. So if you're talking about downloading 5 million data points, you've got to have a computer that can handle that, especially if it's color coded. And so there are some particulars with laser scanning that aren't always the greatest, but it does offer an opportunity for what we call mass data capture. And that is indiscriminate capture of information. You put the laser scanner down. Today, I see you have a question.
I do. I was going to say, I just wanted to make sure that when someone because of course you and I talk a lot about it, but the locality that we had got a laser scan of our great historic courthouse, and that was wonderful. But yes, being right there, not having the software to access it, what kind of things should those entities or anyone out there in any of the barn organizations, if they're going to ask for that kind of documentation, how might they ask for it to, or what could they say to ensure that they would get it in a usable fashion?
So there are a number of different file types they can ask for. So when you have a program like Recap Pro or any of these 3D programs, they tend to talk to each other and allow you to save them in a variety of different formats. And so I mentioned LAZ, LAS, those are particular to kind of laser scanning programs, point cloud programs. However, you can save as OBJs and FBXs, which are different file types that are different, more common software, I should say, is able to open. I'll also add that sometimes you can put these laser scans on browsers and allow people to access it that way. And again, all depends on how you're going to use the data. And ultimately, if you're an entity that's requesting that, how you want to store that data. So there are a lot of moving parts at the end of the day that go into that. And Linda Ramsey, I see you've got a question. Yes. Maybe just hand up. Anyway, I'll keep it going. So laser scanning has a lot of opportunities there, but obviously formatting can play a concern. As I mentioned, file size can also play an issue. And if we kind of look at an example here, this is Ionia Barn. This is a late 18th century barn in Louisa County, Virginia. One of the few survivors. You can obviously see just by looking at the various building phases, right? The oldest being on the left side here. But this is a good example of, as we kind of move through, we can do these fly throughs with this point cloud. It's picking up all sorts of information. Some we don't want, some we do. So we're gonna have to sort through that later. And as we kind of zoom in on the front here, you're also gonna notice that it looks pixelated. Those are the individual data points. So this has millions of data points. When I draw this, or I transfer this into a line drawing, that presents difficulties because I'm not always aware of the outside line that I should be tracing. So you've got this accurate scan, yet translating into a line drawing can be difficult and it can be very time consuming. So you still have to have a delineator. You still have to have somebody who knows how to do the line drawings to kind of convert it. There are other programs out there like BIM, Building Information Modeling, that's available through Revit and some other programs that offer some ability to integrate laser scans with their modeling. But again, that's paying for extra software there. So there are some plus sides to laser scanning, and there are obviously some downsides to it as well. Cool thing is you get this great model and you get these great fly-throughs that you can use to kind of present to folks. A method that I'm really interested in and really excited about, and it's come a long way recently, is photogrammetry. And I do apologize, I mix up photorectification and photogrammetry all the time. Photorectification is what I talked about before. That's taking the image, that's making it flat, that's tracing over it. Photogrammetry involves taking a bunch of photographs using a algorithm, proprietary algorithm that a company has developed to essentially merge those images and create XYZ coordinates or data points. Now, the cool thing here is that it's very accurate if done well. It also is very efficient in terms of time, but also money. So it doesn't cost all that much for the software. You can actually purchase it on a monthly basis. So that's pretty neat. And of course, the equipment that you need for it is just a camera. Now, some cameras are better than others. Canon actually does fairly well. So you get a Canon DSLR that will do quite well with the photogrammetry process. We use Nikons here on campus, and they do fairly well here. So this is the Booker T. Washington Tobacco Barn, and this is one that I'll use in a couple other examples, but we did our photogrammetry with this. And so I had a student helping me out this semester, actually say fall semester. And what you see here is the model that's created through a variety of images. And these images, you can actually see their location by these blue squares. Now, the company that makes this Agisoft Metashape, I always joke, they're a Russian company. So now, of course, that raises all sorts of flags when you're talking about software. But again, they've got a pretty good product when it comes to this. And there are other products out there, other makers of photogrammetry type software. Autodesk used to have one. They've kind of waffled back and forth. But again, it takes these images and then it essentially lines them together by looking for similarities. So here's just a screenshot showing how the program is matching up two different images. What it requires is overlap of those images, so shared points. It looks for similarities on that data, matches them up, provides the XYZ coordinates, and then at the end of it all, you're presented with a model if I go through here, that's just like a laser scan. So again, millions of data points depending on the quality of the image you took and the quality of model that you wanted to render. But of course, without the costs. And in a lot of cases, without the specialized software as well. Agisoft Metashape tends to build everything into itself. And so you can manipulate, you can do a lot of things within that software. And it translates very easily to some other types as well. I mentioned OBJ files, object files, FBX files, and what Autodesk uses quite frequently with a lot of its programs. So it's a great tool for a lot of different reasons, but I like it because it's simplicity. It's easy to use. You just have to know how to basically use a camera. And then it's easy to create the software. It's a step-by-step process, essentially 5 steps. And you've got a model that you can use in a variety of different formats, as well as the compatibility aspect, which is really great. And again, the accuracy, again, depending on the image quality you take, is really fantastic. Students love it. Of course, you still have to take it and you still have to create those line drawings if that's the end game. And again, Agisoft Metashape provides a little bit of a different approach there too, where it allows you to look at ortho views. And you can do that directly in the software, and you can actually capture these ortho views, which remove the perspective distortion, just like photorectification, present the ability then to use that image for the actual measured drawings. And so you get some very accurate images, very accurate drawings, and allows you to, say, look at damage assessment, condition assessment, a little bit more comprehensively. So again, a great tool, very efficient in that fact. It does have its limitations, just like everything else. But I found it to be one of the more efficient tools that I've utilized recently in conjunction. I like to kind of be redundant in my documentation, but I usually use this in conjunction with Photorectification. So I have my laser points that I can actually use to help if I need to kind of coordinate with the photogrammetry that I produce. So some redundancy built in there, but all about accuracy from the academic pursuit. The other thing I'll just mention about Metashape, and I should probably be a salesperson for him, but the idea is that it generates a model that has faces as well. And so you can start using it in a number of other applications that we'll kind of talk about shortly here. And these applications are really where I'm interested in things going. Again, I was frustrated for a long time about the fact that we had these amazing scans, really cool stuff. The heritage documentation programs with Habs, Hair, and House will pop these up on Facebook, and you've got these wonderful fly-throughs, but then it stops there, right? So how can we take this great stuff and how can we use it to our advantage? How can we help disseminate the information we're collecting? And how do we get people interested in preservation, cultural heritage, and specifically barn preservation, right? It also, these different types of software present mechanisms for us to have more in-depth conversations about material and about structures. Some of it's kind of new and emerging, some of it's getting more established. So I think in the next 5 years, especially with Zuckerberg taking over, right, with the metaverse, you'll start seeing a lot of this stuff start to develop. And so the 5 programs I want to just touch on, and I by no means am an expert in all of these, but looking at Matterport, some of you might have heard about Matterport in real estate pages, right, or real estate scenarios. Looking at Merge Cube, which is really an educational tool, very simple to use, but very effective for kids. Sketchfab, one of my favorites. Again, all of these are kind of free or cheap if you want to kind of upgrade. But Sketchfab is a great resource, a great platform to disseminate your models, as well as offer an opportunity to provide additional information. Unity 3D, which is a gaming software, development software that can be used to great effect, although does require a little bit of elbow grease. So that's for the kind of more advanced users. If you want to get into it, Unity is the name of the game. And then, of course, Rumi, which I kind of alluded to at the beginning of the lecture, is something that I'm very excited about just from the standpoint of student interaction. Rumi is kind of the basement floor with this interactive type approach. I use it for a couple reasons, and I'll explain later, but there are other programs out there that do as good, if not a better job. And so I'll give you kind of basic stuff, but there's lots of different types of software and platforms that you can use in a number of different scenarios. So it's kind of the Wild West with this kind of stuff. And so here again, just a model that we created, some Shenandoah Valley barns, and just putting on top of the thatched roof some of the logos here. Now, the first of these is Matterport. As I mentioned, the real estate companies have really taken to this. I think Redfin does a lot of these type of models. It's effective in that you can get a free license. You can, I think, download or upload up to 3 different models, including one of them being active. So you can disseminate this pretty easily. It can also work with just your regular iPhone. So it's iPhone compatible. You can actually go out in the field with an iPhone and create a model. It does have some downsides. The basic cameras that you use, for instance, your iPhone, as well as what we have here is our Insta360. It's just a 360 camera, fairly inexpensive. But working with the Matterport software does not like to document outside. It's too bright. So it's really an interior only, unless you upgrade to the $20,000 cameras, right? And so then you kind of go back beyond that price point again. So it has to have some limitations from a freeware standpoint. Neat thing is here, and this is actually showing the Booker T. Washington Tobacco Barn. I just tried this out so that it's kind of rough around the edges, but just for an illustration purposes, and I wanted to use a barn illustration. But the idea here is that these numbers correspond to where I set up the tripod and the camera within the tobacco barn. And what it does real time is it generates a floor plan so I can see if it was fairly accurate in terms of where it's placing my walls on the outside, where it's placing my entry, and where it's placing my collection points. And I was pretty happy with this, although if you look really critically at it, you'll see that some of the images don't align well. And for anyone who's looking at actual accurate documentation, this is not your ticket. This is a dissemination tool. It uses photogrammetry, but it has a 1 to 4% kind of, what am I looking for? Fail rate, or not fail rate, but inaccuracy, right? So again, it's not the best if you're looking for kind of laser scanning, millimeter type accuracy type stuff. But again, from a quick standpoint, really efficient and effective. And what it can do is offer tours of the space as well. So if you're looking to get people interested in barns, if you're looking to have them tour through a location that may not be accessible, whether due to health reasons or because it's an actually active farm and people don't want you walking through there, you can do these kind of virtual tours. And so I'm going to bring this up, and I might have to log in, but we'll see. Nope, I'm good here. And I'm going to just drag this over. Hopefully everyone sees that. Today, you want to give me a thumbs up if you see the new screen? All right, get a thumbs up. Okay, so what this is the Matterport. This is our free version here. And what you can do is you can share these links, in this case, the Booker T. Washington Tobacco Barn. And as I click on this, what it's going to do is load up my 360 images I took. And so what I can do is kind of pan around and actually look at the interior of the barn. You can see it doesn't like the light, right? So that's a major disadvantage of it, but you get some pretty decent images. And again, this is rough. You can do this better. But the idea is you can kind of zoom in, you can look at things. And if you want a closer look at stuff, you can move to another place where you took a measurement from. Now, this had a little bit of kind of rough edges here, but again, you can kind of look around and you would gather about every 3 feet a data point or a 360 image. So again, fairly effective, fairly efficient. Is it the most accurate? No, but it does provide some cool information. It also allows you to start adding annotations. So here I have a matter tag, and I can click on those. And here I just linked a Library of Congress image, but if you have your own website, you can link images there. You can use Dropbox and other type of data sharing devices or software to store things and then disseminate that through links that will or can be embedded into the matter tags. So again, a nice tool for kind of dissemination purposes to that end. So let me go ahead and kind of pull that away. All right. Another program that I actually like, is probably my favorite of the 5 that I'm going to talk about, is Sketchfab. And Sketchfab has been around for a while, but what Sketchfab allows you to do is upload any model, whether that's something you've created in SketchUp, right? So basic SketchUp design, or whether it's something that you scanned in with a laser scanner, or even with your photogrammetry, right? Your Metashape type software. Now, if you build something in, say, SketchUp or 3D Studio Max, and you're kind of reconstructing stuff, fairly simple process to upload. You essentially take your model file folder, you put it with your materials, you zip it up, and you upload it. Metashape, however, has a direct upload that'll go right to the site and allow you to start actually using the model in Sketchfab which can be disseminated or shared in a number of different varieties. So got here this other link, which I will pull up and kind of move this over. And I think I've got this brought up here. Right, so if you can see this is Sketchfab. And so what we have here is the Booker T. Washington model already uploaded. And what's nice here is that I have the ability to add in information below. So actually talk about the model or talk about the barn itself. And I can embed images. I can embed links here. I can also look at sharing it in a variety of different auto-populated platforms. So those of you who are younger than I am or more socially adept can tell me what a bunch of these mean. But I see Facebook and Twitter, right? So you have some options there. You can also embed your code. So in WordPress or any kind of website format, you can use the code to put it directly into your web page, which can be really effective. Or you just copy the link and you distribute it by email. The other nice thing here too is that you need no special software to view it. So it's browser based, which is fantastic. When we're dealing with laser scans, and that was a question Danae had earlier, you don't want specialized software to open all this stuff, but you still want people to be able to use it. And Sketchfab presents that opportunity. It does have limitations about file size, but for the most part provides a really great opportunity for other people to view what's being created. And so we've got the model information, the ability to share. The other really neat thing is it's VR, virtual reality compatible right away. And so we've got this little button down here, which I'll show you in a second, but it's a view in VR. So you don't have to do any special formatting. Now, if I enter into the model itself, so go to full screen, I can manipulate the model by moving around. I can zoom in, right? So here I can look at the notching. I see Mr. Reed is on the call. So Mr. Reed and Danae can talk about notching for a long time, as I assume a lot of other people on the call can as well. But the idea is that you've got this model that you can start to manipulate and move around. I've also taken the liberty, just because I was having fun, added in some other components, my tobacco leaves. And of course, you can go inside and actually look at the interior of the structure as well. So again, that navigation, which is not as restrictive as Matterport, but doesn't necessarily have some of the qualities that your images might have. The other really neat thing about Sketchfab is, like Matterport, allows you to add annotations. So I can put these in any location I want. And if I click on them, it'll give me information about that. So for instance, here I've just linked a Dropbox account. I should pull up. And of course, Dropbox is probably gonna want me to do stuff, but here we have it pop up, and it's just a condition assessment, integrity assessment that we're doing with this particular example here. So you can do that. In this case, go back. Oh, I wanted the model itself, and I can't get there. Here we go. Always too many windows, right? There we go. But if I go back into my model here and I click on the bottom, I can also have, of course, my images linked. So in this case, we've got a historic image of the tobacco barn that we can link as well. So you can kind of see that. So it provides some options beyond just the model, allows people to explore at their kind of own rate, which again, is kind of another effective tool. I mentioned VR compatibilities. This is a really neat thing too. It's automatically VR compatible. So you upload it, you can do some alterations and some parameter changes, or you don't have to. And that allows you to put on those VR goggles or not. But if you do, you can actually access this in kind of a more immersive environment. And so, you know, the younger generation, my students, this is something that they're becoming more and more familiar with. And so as they look to explore things, and here, you know, I'm actually craning my head to look into the barn, right? So this is actually me physically interacting with it. I'm teleporting to some degree because I don't want to run to my desk. And that's what that laser that you're looking at is. But you can navigate around the barn. And the neat thing too is you can also view it from different perspectives. So you'll see in a second here, I can start climbing on the actual logs. So any flat surface will allow me access to it. So you can see I'm trying, and I'll eventually find another location, right? Pop here, go up, and then I can actually look from a different perspective, and I can hop on the different poles and actually see, right, different perspective associated with the barn itself. And so again, a nice immersive environment, again, directly compatible with Sketchfab. And there I am logging out. moving beyond the VR component into augmented reality. So that's another platform that's out there that really warrants some discussion. I think this is kind of where things are going. I'm not sure Merge is where it's going to be. Actually, Sketchfab has a AR component with a QR code. Essentially, you scan with your phone and your barn would pop up right in front of you. But that costs a little bit more to develop. Very user-friendly, but again, it has a cost. Merge is free, just like everything else I'm kind of presenting here, and provides an augmented reality experience. This is great for kind of school-age children. So my daughter, for instance, played around with this, mainly with dinosaurs and not barns. But the idea is that it can engage them, it can let them view things in a different way, and you can use it on your independent device, your iPhone or your iPad. And again, browser-based, so you're not downloading a lot of software. You do have to download a free Merge viewer, but that's pretty basic and doesn't have a cost associated with it. So here's Merge, and here's some of the models that I've uploaded from SketchUp all the way to my Metashape. I will say currently it's having some issues with material application, and that is a big drawback. And it's something I've noticed with Merge. It's kind of not doing as good a job keeping up with things. But what it does is allows you to take, for instance, any flat surface. So I can upload my model to Merge. I essentially open my Merge application, and then I can place my models wherever I want. So here you can see on the left, there's a location flat surface that allows me to place my model there. I just tap and my model pops up. Now what's really neat is I can fix it in that location, and then I can move around it with my phone and see it from different angles. I can enlarge it, I can rotate it, right? I can move it up and down. And so you really start getting this kind of interactive experience. Animations can also be added to these as well to show, for instance, how things get put together. So those of you who do timber framing, right? If you want to show the children, K through 12, how a mortise and tenon goes together, you can do that in a program like Merge, and to great effect. I also used it recently with my students, my freshmen, to create a one-to-one model of the back of barn. And what we did was took it outside. We placed it on our middle of our plaza here. And this is me actually walking through with my iPhone. And so the cool thing is you literally walk through the door, right? And then you start to look around. It's a white model. I assume Merge will get their act together and allow us to buy materials in the near future. But again, you can see how that kind of interacts with the landscape itself. Obviously some tweaks, but again, from a student perspective, I can fix this and then we can walk around it and talk about that model or that specific location or structure as a group, as we're looking at it. And here you can actually see those freshmen doing that. So these are 17 and 18-year-olds actually using this software real time out in the field to view a barn. And so one-to-one, they're walking through it. You can see, right, crouching down to look at the various kind of entryways and features of the barn itself. You do have to be careful that people don't run into each other though, right? It's always a problem. Unity, the second of the last ones I'll talk about here. Unity 3D is gaming software. Gaming software has a lot of possibilities for interactive type aspects dealing with cultural heritage, barn preservation. Students today, I noticed in my class, love the gamification of things. We might not always think it's the best way to teach, but it does engage their interest. I was opposed to it for a long time, but anything at this point to make things interesting, and gaming software provides some opportunity for that. So this again is that Booker T. Washington tobacco barn. This is imported, it's a Metashape. I imported it directly into Unity. In this case, I saved it as an FBX to import into Unity. Did that with its material, which you can see in the asset here, and applied it, again, fairly easily, fairly fluidly. Now, when you start to get a little bit more detail, that's where all this other stuff comes in. So for the layperson, this is probably not your best bet. However, for those of you who like programming, know a little bit about C# or just how to find code, this is a very powerful tool. And I would also say for those of you who may not be getting into this on the in-depth level, understanding that it exists and how it can be used. And in fact, all of these software and programs, understanding how they can be used can be extremely effective. You don't necessarily need to know how to do it, but you need to know what to ask for. And so with Unity, getting someone to do these things can enable you to provide a lot of interesting content. In fact, Colonial Williamsburg did this a few years ago. They had to take their site down because of maintenance issues, but allowed people to walk through on their desktop Colonial Williamsburg as recreated in 1776, clicking on various buildings and getting lots of information. Actually, the reports that they had in those historic structures reports were housed in these little clicks. So you could get a lot of information virtually, but also in a visual sense. And again, if you're visual learners, it's a great tool. So what I'm doing here is I've created my little capsule with all sorts of physics applied to that. This is actually acting as a in-person controller. And so the idea is that you can go around, move around, pick up things like tobacco stakes and actually move them around the model. So if you want to get students interested about how tobacco was cured within the barn, you can start to show that. And so just a real quick animation here, but that's from the viewpoint of that capsule. And the idea being, let's see if we can move it, is that you can start to show these animations. And this was just me quickly putting things together. But again, fairly rudimentary, but you can get much more detailed with this and much higher quality. It can also be browser based, again, so you don't necessarily need specialized software to generate this stuff. And again, all this from point clouds, right? Those kind of laser scans, those photogrammetry type models. So again, it allows you to kind of explore the different sites, again, on your own time. And then the last item, or the last kind of software I want to discuss, is Rumi. This is something, again, I've used with my students in talking about historic structures. We had a good time actually integrating models with it as well. And so this is one of the few platforms that I've found that looks at both virtual reality, looks at the ability to engage your models that you create, as well as PowerPoint, at the same time, actually PDF format in this case, and accessible via not only VR goggles, but also just your PC. So you don't need virtual reality goggles to do this. And in fact, if virtual reality makes you sick, which it does to some people, you can use the PC and still participate in these type of interactions. And so what it does is it presents everybody at the same time. So if we were doing one of these meetings, there would be 16 of us in this room. You would all have your own control, meaning you could go pay attention to my lecture, look at it, or you could go into the model and do whatever you wanted, right? You could look at the different notching, you could look at the door, you could look at anything you wanted to with it. And so I don't control your actions. You can also participate by asking questions directly, raising hands, right? So there's a lot of interactive components to it, which make it, I think, a pretty effective tool. And so here's just a screenshot of the model as well as the PowerPoint that I'm currently giving. And again, if we look at kind of animation or just a video here, you can kind of see that. So this is me scrolling through it as a PDF. And so I can talk about each of these slides that we've already gone through. I did change the order there. And then I can move out and we can kind of walk towards the building and start looking at that as well. So someone might say, oh, I've got a question about the notch. Well, let's go over and let's take a look at it, right? Static image only gets you so far. The ability to start looking at the models allows you to start interacting with the actual structure if you can't be there physically. So kind of this next best thing. So I'm big on Rumi in terms of its ability to interact and use these point clouds and this modeling to start engaging people in kind of these virtual tours. I think it's a really effective tool. And here, just a great image showing that it does work with multiple people. These are my students from a couple semesters ago. This is an image of them using Rumi, Zoom, looking at themselves, right? So I thought it was kind of fun there. But the idea is that they got to create their own avatars. They get to see each other. They get to interact, see which way they're facing. And you can see none of them, including myself without my little bit shorter hair there, but none of them have virtual reality glasses on. So they don't need the specialized goggles to do this, which again has a lot of advantages from a cost standpoint. And that is something I mentioned, cost. Cost does play a big role. That's part of the reason I presented a lot of the freeware this evening, is because a lot of the pay stuff tends to have a pretty high cost associated with it. And that's true with the documentation type of techniques that I went over as well. They can range from a few $1,000s to $40,000, $50,000 for an upper end laser scanner. Prices, yes, have come down, but still in a lot of cases kind of cost prohibitive. So things like photogrammetry provide a more cost-effective way to get some of the information we might need. And I don't want to say this replaces those really accurate drawings. In some cases, you need that stuff, but you don't always. And I know that's always been a hurdle for why a lot of us in cultural heritage fields don't use measured drawings more often. We see them as too expensive, too time consuming, but there are other ways that we can use it that I think are incredibly beneficial and more efficient ways that we can actually do the documentation if we're willing to sacrifice a little of the accuracy associated with the techniques. So with that, I think I'm right on 40 some minutes today. I will open it up to any questions folks have.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was wonderful and a very good cursory kind of introduction. I know, and I'm sure other people, am I frozen or is that just me looking at my own face frozen?
Let me see real quickly.
You don't appear to be frozen.
Oh, excellent. Okay. My phone is having the problems. And yeah, but I think I know you use a fairly small structure in the tobacco barn in the sense, and of course, you know, I love it when you light it on fire. It's just awesome. But I think like, and I'm glad to see, you know, people from across the country here, but you know, it makes me realize the possibilities too of recreating, you know, of reconstruction, either buildings that are lost that we still have, you know, HABs documentations for that maybe we could create a model from and therefore start something in, or even, you know, I think about the more like iconic gigantic barns, like what Wisconsin has the largest round barn in the world, or like some of it, Bob, is it IU that has their 3 round barns, but of course they've changed over time and they're not used the same. But I just think about the abilities to actually show all the cows in there and to try and kind of convey the actual, you know, experience of that type, why it is historically significant because of what it was capable of doing. So anyway, so I guess my question again kind of relates more to assuming that maybe some of the people on the call are more would be more of the end users than necessarily the producers. But I do appreciate that you discussed a bit about photogrammetry and how there are ways that even technologically limited people like me could adapt to find ways to use this type of software. So anyway, if you could expand a little bit more on those issues, I'd love it. Thank you.
Yeah, so kind of a lot of questions rolled up, and I see some in the chat as well, so I can address those at the same time. So first off, size of the building is kind of inconsequential. Obviously, you're gonna need some more images to get really detailed models, but a lot of folks will use drones, for instance, to do aerial grabs. And so they'll do a couple hundred images there and actually get very extensive models. Obviously, the more images you take, the more detailed it is. You do run into file size problems, as one of the questions in the chat was asking. Programs like Metashape do allow you to keep your very large file, but also a process which I love the term, that is, you can decimate your mesh, right? So I always talk to the students about decimating my mesh. And that's an ability to start aligning the faces that you generate through those millions of data points. And so it can take, you can actually specify how many faces you want on it. So you can take it from 50,000 and reduce it to 10,000. And obviously your file size correlates to that. So there are some ways to make it compatible with programs like Sketchfab. And again, to get some of those large structures. In fact, I'd encourage folks, you can go ahead and explore Sketchfab without even signing up on an account and just type in barn. And you're going to get some kind of comical barns, you know, that, you know, you might use in I don't know, cartoon, but you're also gonna get some people who've actually scanned these in using Metashape. They've decimated the mesh and they've uploaded those. And the neat thing is, if they make them downloadable, you can download them and start getting information off of those. So again, a really kind of effective tool with that. And that also kind of correlates to or touches on something Danae was mentioning, which is end user versus kind of modifier, that sort of thing. If you just know how to look for these things, then you're able to participate in that dissemination and grab that additional data, right? So knowing that they exist is a powerful thing in and of itself, and that these platforms are increasing in number, and that data sharing is going to be something that is going to continue. So again, you get a kind of a lot of possibilities there. Danae, I know you had other questions embedded with that, so that hopefully touched on the size of the barns. I think the other one was the animations.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you were right there, and I'm looking back at the chat too. I know Tammy had a question about the best ways of turning some of these digital documentation efforts into the things that, of course, we know people need for actual barn rehabilitations. I mean, I realize to a certain extent, Michael and I know preservationists in general, right? We have always marveled at the fact that sometimes things can be adaptively reused without as is exact documentation. So anyway, but it does seem as though that these software devices are a good way of finding a middle ground, perhaps, in creating an efficient, more easily accessible data point to create, plans, elevations, construction drawings. Is there one software or another that you think works best for that, or how do those things are they best extracted from this?
So again, you love these multi-part questions. I love it. So I'm
complex
about the kind of generation of line drawings first. So how I use the software, the documentation software and techniques I talked about earlier, they still require, for the most part, a program like AutoCAD and the tracing ability. So you can buy specialized software, for instance, as built, and there's some others that have built-in features that will follow based on your tolerances that you give it. Basically, the parameters of your data points will go ahead and draw in lines. Matterport, for instance, allows you to also upload your cloud, your data cloud, and let someone else do the drawing for you. Now, of course, the accuracy is not that great, but you do have some possibilities there. So if you don't want to do it, they will have already purchased that interpretive software and can actually generate that floor plan, that section, or that elevation for you. And that's true with a number of these different software programs. You can upload these things. Recap Pro, the Autodesk software, will also generate a mesh if you purchase a Pro version. And then there are folks that will take that and generate drawings off of it. But if you're looking at kind of cost savings, if you're looking at kind of doing it on your own, without specialized software, you're still taking these ortho images, these rectified images, and you're tracing over top of them, or you're going point to point in a data cloud, which is not necessarily the best either. So I will say that translation still requires quite a bit of time. That's, again, why I typically like Photorectification as a process for generating my line drawings. I think it's very efficient. And then I use the point cloud to help out with particulars. So my workflow relies on that. Unfortunately, that's multiple thousands of dollars of equipment that I'm talking about. Got a total station, that's at least a couple thousand used, right? Leica being my favorite, of course, top brand, right? You get other ones that are a little bit less expensive. But then you've got your software, that's another $3,000, right? So we're talking about a package of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to generate some of this stuff. So again, cost does play a role in there. I think it will come down. But bottom line is you're still going to have to put in a lot of elbow grease to generate this stuff if you want some form of accuracy. So Jane, I hope that answered your question to some degree. And again, unless you buy a specialized software, you're kind of doing it on your own there. The other question was talking about which platform would I suggest maybe using or purchasing. Because these are all free, it's going to allow you to try each of these out. And I would strongly encourage that if any of these kind of appealed, to do that first and foremost. Do a free account. They don't spam you. I've been parts of these accounts for years. And so they're pretty good about that. I don't know about sharing your email address with others, but I don't get anything direct from them. But the idea is that you can try it out for free, see how it works, and then go from there, because every organization is going to be different. And like was mentioned in the comment, there is going to be a learning curve with some of it. The one that I have found that there's really not much of a learning curve is Sketchfab. If you can use your mouse, you are in good shape. It is fairly intuitive. It allows you to explore things. It's very fluid in the sense that it's using the browser, so you don't have to download specialized software, and allows you some further development if you are a, say, generator of models. You can do some manipulation with that in the program itself. However, though, if you're kind of really wanting to delve deep into this stuff, your Unity programs are going to be really amazing. They provide good support from a tutorial standpoint, and there are a lot of communities out there that'll answer your questions. But I would say if you're not excited about technology, if digital stuff makes you nervous, Unity's probably not the place to be, but Sketchfab might be the place to be. So hopefully that kind of answered that question. I know we've used it effectively in our Facebook posts on our department website. So we embed it in our Facebook, and they have a SketchUp model or Sketchfab model that they can go around and they can look at that's shared. Kind of going down the list. Yeah, I'm happy to offer a list of software. I think also, Danae, I can generate a PDF. I know you're talking to our daughter, it looks like, but I can generate a PDF that's got the links, or I can give a Word file, however you'd want to distribute that, of these various software and their links that are out there. So I've got them incorporated in the PowerPoint, but we can put them together as a list if folks want to review that. I see Gail has a hand up. Gail, is there a question you have?
Hi there, Michael. Thanks for all this great information. I'm in Massachusetts, in central Massachusetts, and a member of a historical commission. Also a barn owner of a mid-1700s English barn, which my husband and I renovated and adapted to several different uses. But my question is, I'm not so much concerned about actually doing all this data, research, but I'm interested in knowing how we, as a commissioner of the historical commission here in my town, how would we go about locating somebody that would be qualified? What do you call yourselves? That how do you find somebody that could do that? We have several barns that we want to preserve, and I think it would be helpful to have some, something on paper for people to look at when we want to adapt them to a different use, to find a new owner and a new steward of them.
Yeah, no, great question. And I would think if I were to do some sleuthing, what I might do is actually Sketchfab. You can look at locations, see who's modeling in what areas. Okay. And then they'll have names and contact information. You can send them a message. And the idea there is that a lot of these people are going to be, some are interested in cultural heritage. So they do it as kind of like amateur photographers. They go around, they create models, and they say, look at this is great, I'm sharing it, that sort of thing. Some of them are gamers. And so I would say anyone involved in computer science and gaming is actually a great source for kind of understanding how to present some of this information. But I would also say, things like the Metashape and other stuff are also fairly easy to try to learn yourself. So there's possibilities there. So yeah, I think looking at those kind of areas. The other thing is if you have any kind of regional universities, even community colleges, they're getting involved in this stuff from a computer science standpoint. So a lot of students are becoming more and more active in these types of approaches. Communications programs. I always wondered what communication programs and departments did. But this is one of the things that some of them seem to be getting involved in. So for instance, here at Mary Washington, they do a lot with kind of computer science type stuff. At UVA, obviously a larger university, but their documentation is actually aligned with their library. So there are a lot of different outlets. I would say, Massachusetts, you've got a number of universities, and I am sure that many of them probably have centers attached and would do this type of work, fee for service, or even in some cases as student type projects. But again, I'd look, gamers, look on Sketchfab, see if you can identify people who are posting these things and kind of sort them out and ask them what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. Great information. Thank you. I think the university approach would be good because they're always looking for projects, right?
Yeah, and I would say if anyone does want to use universities, remember the semester schedules, right? So if you're going to ask for a project, ask in August, right? So you want to get it so the professor's not fresh off their spring semester and is geared up and ready to go for the fall semester, right? But if you ask in September, fall's already started, right? So right. Think of August, and then for the spring semester, December is a good time to make those asks, and then they can coordinate schedules with you. So just from an academic standpoint, that's usually a good approach.
Great, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. I see another question here. Line drawings from a 30s Habs log dog truck building. I assume,
yes. I thought that would be lovely too, Doug. Can we recreate the things that we have images from years past that are no longer with us?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So what I would do in that case is I'd take the Habs drawing, I'd import it into a program like I use for my base modeling SketchUp, but then I go into 3D Studio Max and Maya, depending on what I want to do with those models. But what I would do is I'd essentially do my line art. I'd pop things out, push and pull, create the volumes, create the objects. And then for my customization, I would take it into 3D Studio Max and I'd actually start playing with particulars. So if you have a log that has a lot of bends in it, I can actually add vertices in 3D Studio Max and manipulate that so you get spot on those vertices and those changes and those undulations with the log. So it's as simple as just taking the image that Habs generates, right, from those drawings, popping it in a program, creating the massing in a baseline program like Sketchfab, that's my work, or SketchUp, that's my workflow, and then going to 3D Studio Max to create a more photoreal type version. You don't have to do that, but trust me, when you're exposed to SketchUp rendering versus 3D Studio Max, there's a huge difference. Most people can get by with using SketchUp, though. It's a powerful tool. It's intuitive. But if you want to, again, take it to that next level, some of those Autodesk type of software out there are really fantastic for that. So yeah, that's something our students have done in the past, is recreate Habs drawings. It used to be an assignment.
Now, if we don't have a Habs drawing, we only have like images. Now, you can't necessarily work with those as well because you don't have the measurements to verify, right?
So cool case studies with that. You need a lot of images, but you could potentially import those into a program like Metashape and possibly get something out of it. So I think it was the Lane Buddhas in Afghanistan. I don't know if anybody remembers those before the US, I think, invasion, they got blown up. They actually used tourist images and georeferencing associated with those images to virtually recreate and model the Lane Buddhas. Now, I don't know about the accuracy, and I don't know how many images they needed, but right, that's something. The other way to go about that too is if you have an image and you're able to get some data points, like from a foundation, you might start being able to auto-correct or correct the photographs from a perspective standpoint. You're not going to get the lens distortion out because you don't know, you haven't calibrated the camera itself. So yeah, that's problematic, but you can get pretty close in some cases. Bob, I see you've waited patiently with your hand up there. Unmute though. Bob, can you unmute? Oh, there you go. Oh. Nope, still muted.
Bob, you're muted. Unmute.
Still muted, Bob.
If you touch the screen, the unmute should be in the bottom left corner when it pops up, but then it goes away if you're not touching. I don't know if that helps. Sorry, annoying dog.
Okay. All right. What, Michael, I don't know if you know of my Bill, who's written 4 books on virtual VR. And he's always said, you know, take more pictures, take more pictures. And I never know, you know, like I see like the tobacco barn. I knew it was a tobacco barn when you showed me the interior and I saw those beams going across the middle. But anyway, I don't know how many pictures a guy should take. You know, a whole chip full or what?
Well, he's not wrong. I mean, the nice thing today is that storage for the most part is relatively cheap. So, you know, you take as many images as you can. It never hurts to have more. I would say quality is a big factor there. And also your positioning. So if you're actually looking to make models out of it, you can take 1,000,001 images, but if you don't get all angles and if there's no overlap, they're not gonna coordinate. And so part of it is your positioning. And I usually just, I kind of do a 3-step rule where I take my camera and you'll see me just kind of walk in a circle around the structure. Every 3 steps, I snap an image. So if it's a very long or a very large structure, I'm taking a lot of images.
Yeah.
If it's not, I get by with fewer. So I think the log barn, I might have used 80 to 90 images to create that. If you're looking at a very large field, multiple barns and structures, you might have a couple hundred. the other thing that Metashape will allow, so some of you might, eyes are kind of getting big. That's a lot of data to process. And actually, Metashape will allow you to upload to their servers to do the processing now as well. And so you can do it off-site, which really is a great way to reduce your time. But yeah, Bob, it's not incorrect to just go ahead and take as many images as you can, as long as you're making sure that there is some thought given to the position that you take them in. That's my only kind of caveat there. Otherwise, take as many as you want. And then what you can do later is you can always decimate the model. You can always reduce the file size, or you can always be selective in the images you choose to use.
All right.
If
Thank you.
If you go through an entire chip, you've probably taken too many.
Yeah, and I've known he's taken, I've got pieces of pottery that he wanted me to take a picture of, and I must be 30 or 40 just for a pot, and there's some beautiful ones here in Southern Illinois that were trophies from the Kirkpatrick pottery, the people that made the snake jugs, et cetera, and they may also made fair jugs, which are basically cuneiform tablets. They wrote like, Michael Spencer was ahead of the sheep barn, and Danae was in charge of the swine or something anyway. And so I've taken all these pictures, and he said, like 30 for just a jug, and it's like, yeah, it really makes great sense, but a barn is a whole lot different thing than a jug would be.
And funny enough, and then Linda, if you've got a question, I'll get to you in a second here. But funny enough, barns and kind of structures lend themselves to photogrammetry fairly easily because of the variation. So if you have a tablet, even with the different markings on it, if there's a lot of homogeneous type coloration. So for instance, modeling a brick is very difficult, even if it's a hand molded brick. There's not a lot of data points to get to. And so Metashape does offer the ability to selectively identify points. And so you can manually align some of those images together to help the process. So, but that's kind of getting a little bit in the weeds with it. From just a generic standpoint, a general standpoint, as long as you get good coverage and you get a lot of images, you should be in good shape. And that'll also, Bob, allow you to get the underside of the object.
Yeah.
You gotta do it. You can flip it over, and as long as you have similarities on the side, it'll be a floating object. I had a student model a Lionel train this semester, and he got the underside and everything to it. And it was a great little model. Really fantastic.
Does it work?
The
train doesn't move.
No, he didn't add animation. We are beginners. These are undergraduates. So I was happy enough that the project came out okay. But Linda, do you have a question? I see you've had your hand up for a while.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, good. Okay. I was muted a few minutes ago. I did my thesis on barns of the Red Bed Plains and in Oklahoma, and I documented over 50 plus barns. But I was a lay person, not accustomed to having some of the sites that you spoke about to download or upload. I had to take a measuring tool to measure and step off. That's how I measured many of the interior of the barns. I took a lot of photographs, and I had an architectural student that I actually had to pay to do all the renderings for me, the floor plans. And but Oklahoma, is fairly a newer state in 1907, and so a lot of our barns weren't built before during the 1800s. So, but I found a lot of interesting ones, and but I wish I'd had some of these tools that you mentioned when I did my thesis in 2008. So.
Yeah, no, and you're not necessarily alone in not knowing about this software. A lot of it's new. A lot of it's been inaccessible until very recently, in fact. So that's why kind of bringing some of these things up. The other thing is sometimes good old hand measuring is all you need. With all this technology, I still will take a molding profile And that to me is the most effective way for me to grab a molding profile off a historic house. I can do it very quickly. I can put it down 1-to-1 and I can scan in later to import into my drawing. The laser scanning would take me hours to trace it. And in some cases, the detail wouldn't be good. So, you know, there are low-tech solutions that need to be integrated with the high-tech. And so one of the big things to kind of keep in mind is that there's not necessarily a one-size-fit-all. It's just knowing what's available so that you can tailor your needs and figure out the program to best fit. But thanks, Linda.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you. All right, any other questions folks have? Well, I enjoyed speaking tonight. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Hopefully it didn't put anyone to sleep, but for those of you who want to go to sleep, then you're welcome. You wouldn't be hearing me. But anyway, I'm happy to talk directly to anybody who wants to. Obviously, Danae can send my contact information if the dog doesn't bark. And then I will try to generate that list to give to Danae to distribute to those who wish to know a little bit about the websites and kind of explore on their own. But thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I was gonna say, and I think, Michael, I put a link in the most recent email to your actual staff directory page at UMW. So hopefully everyone, if they want to, can follow that to get your email follow-up. And certainly this will be pasted to our YouTube. And so hopefully we'll continue to spread the good word here with dog included for all interested.
Well, and
Thank you.
live forever on YouTube now, right?